about how we need to basically be more of a check on Turkey, and Turkey's actions in Syria, in Libya, and around the region are destabilizing. Trump, on the other hand, did what Turkey wanted. He did what Turkey wanted by withdrawing from northeastern Syria. He was actively very friendly with Recep Erdogan. He was very friendly with the man. Erdogan and Trump had a very close personal relationship. They were friendly. I can't think of a single time that Trump acted against the interests of the Turkish government. Can you?
When he was, it might not have been specifically against the Turkish government, but his criticisms of NATO and not wanting to fund it as much is certainly something that I don't think Turkey would have been a fan of. And I also think that his position sort of on refugee status in the United...
But that had nothing to do with Turkey. That just had to do with him being more isolationist in nature. Nothing to do with Turkey.
That's something that Turkey wanted. But it doesn't... It's a moot point
Is there any time where he has actually like confronted Turkey on any of their policies like Biden has?
No. Okay. I can't think of anything. I can't say that I'll say this. I'll take your word because I don't have any proof that he did. It could be that he did and I'm not aware of it, but I'll take your word that I'm certainly not aware. But the point is, sorry. I got my neocon sunglasses with me. I was trying to do the CSI Miami thing, but you can't see me. It's not funny.
Did you see my recent picture, my like CIA picture that resurfaced?
No, I didn't see it.
Let's see if I can find it quick. There's this old picture of me from an ID I had where I look like super like sketch. Not like sketchy like I'm like a criminal, but sketchy like I'm gonna put you in a van and you're never gonna like appear again. 1 second.
See, I knew before it was popular what was going on.
I knew it was before it was popular. 1 second. Let's see if I can find
don't worry, I got all the neocon names to call you today.
Wonderful.
Mr. Crystal, Mr. Rumsfeld, Kissinger.
We send it over.
Oh,
yeah. What do you think of that,
dude? You look like one of the Sarnev brothers.
I look like it's just not. It's not a very endearing picture. Like you see this guy, it's not the type of friendly, like family-oriented man exactly you want to see like appear in your neighborhood.
I look forward to seeing you on the cover of the Rolling Stone after some heinous crime.
Okay.
They'll airbrush you though. That's what they did to the Sarnov guy. So.
Okay, so this happened a while ago. Actually, I gotta use the bathroom quick. Could you just entertain chat for a little bit? I don't know, talk about wrestling. I
certainly will. Oh, wrestling.
I don't know anything. Well, I'll be right back.
Yeah. All right. So, thank you, Dylan's chat. All of you progressive / neocons that are here today to advocate for war being good. It is always a pleasure to come on and argue against warmongers. Even though Dylan's a friend of mine, he's one of a litany of secret neocons that I'm actually good friends with. So it'd be nice to come and push back against it. But now I'm sure Dylan will tell the story. We kind of got in a Twitter spat, if you will, about Jimmy Dore. And that was right around the time that Vosh was debating Jackson Hinkle. And I did a review of the Jackson debate. Dylan offered for me to come on and discuss this issue. And I said, sure, but I was mowing that day. One of the things is, like, I'm sure me and Dylan will get heated here. I don't give a shit about that stuff. I'm passionate. So is Dylan. I still like Dylan and I like talking to him. I think that things get chirpy on places like Twitter because you can't see if someone's joking or what their tone is. So that's why I'm more than happy to come on and discuss this issue. Because I think that it is worthwhile to talk about serious disagreements. Having said that, I'm going to pick on Dylan the whole time for being no doubt related to Bill Kristol or, not a Jimmy Dore fan. But just a quick, I'm watching Dylan's chat right now. Just a quick, like, what's the feeling from like the left side of the aisle on Jimmy Dore on Dylan's chat? Yeah, it's the Gish Gallop guy. Or in other words, things that lefties say about me because they can never handle the actual points that I'm making, so they have to make shit up. I heard Destiny say Rob was a Gish Galloper once, so we all repeat it like robots. Because we have to rely on other people to come up with our thoughts because we're not original. We're just hive-minded sheep that want to embrace anything that the left says to virtue signal. Yeah, we get it, Dylan's chat. We get it. Jimmy bad, Jimmy grifter, right. Because even though I'm not a progressive, God forbid someone actually stick to their ideals. It's funny how quick the left became the actual grifting party that embrace everything that they used to claim to hate. When I started, I'm an old man, so I'm 37. When I started college back in the day, I had all these left-wing friends. And even though they didn't like me as a right-winger, the one thing we agreed on was this interventionism was bad. And it's funny to see all it took was Obama and Trump to make so much of the left now pro-interventionist. So
I am back. How's it going?
good. I'm just antagonizing your audience. It's good for viewership. They'll like it. So
yeah, they love it. They love a heel. Did you
I'm
see
good
the
at that.
hippy dippy stuff? The hippy dippy championship? How much controversy was born out of that?
I did not see. I will admit I didn't watch it, but I heard that you're a bad transphobic man for cheating trans people out of the legitimate title and shilling for Destiny. How can you shill for Destiny and Vosh at the same time? It's very
it's a very profitable arc. Honestly, it's like being able to be. It's like you know, left Twix and right Twix. You know those commercials?
Yeah.
I'm like the guy who sends them both caramel.
See, here's the thing. Right now, you're Dylan Burns, but soon you're going to be the character Dylan Burns, just like when McMahon became the character Mr. McMahon.
That's what we've unironically done. That's what we've unironically done, and I've had, and but it sucks because I feel like I have to explain it to people, and that like defeats like every. Could you imagine if at the start of every wrestling program someone was like, I just want everybody to know that this isn't real, this isn't true.
Listen, if your car blows up, I'll be sure to tell everyone, look, it's part of the angle. This is kayfabe. Yeah, trust me, Dylan's all right, you know.
Oh my god. Hey, look, all I know is I don't know how people survived without watching like The Wizard of Oz and having a trigger warning at the beginning saying that none of this is true. Nobody was actually crushed by a home.
Listen, you can say what you want about us dirty right-wingers. You don't get shit from people like us like you do the left. Like they straight up, I've seen some of the comments like on Twitter. There are people that hate you, like vitriol. Yeah. Like it blows my mind. Like it could be because you platformed me or because the right person didn't win the championship or whatever. Like, do people not realize that, look, the championship's like a MacGuffin. It's entertaining, but it's not like, I doubt that it's going to go on Destiny's resume, you know, as he's applying for jobs. Like, I won the Hippy Dippy Championship, me and Vosh, you know. So I don't know why people get so fired up. It's just entertainment. Like the arguments are real, but the idea of the belt and stuff, I don't know. Whatever. It's your business, not mine.
Well, you know, people need bad guys. People need villains. I think unironically they enjoy hating me. I saw there was this one streamer who hates me despises me, has once said they were going to send me to prison. Legitimately thought they were going to send me to prison. And after my recent event, they were doing research into wrestling tropes and wrestling history, like watching full documentaries on stream, so they could find stuff to use against me to see what my next move was gonna be. It was. I don't know, man. Oh, by the way, I turned on my camera.
I'll talk to you off. I'll talk to you off live stream some night. I've been having a lot of shit with doxing and stuff like that, which sucks. And what's weird is it's no one that we stream with. It's no one that's on a panel with you. But
be careful. Never use my real name on stream. DylanBurnsTV allows me to live a second life.
Well, see, in my name, Rob Noor, that's actually a pseudonym. My real name, I hate to say it here, is actually Normal America with Rob Noor. Yeah. That's my God-given name. So I did switch because I was getting doxxed with that and go back to Rob Noor. But
amen, brother.
My phone number got out, and so now I get nice phone calls all the time. Do you want me on video on Discord? I can do that if you want.
Yeah, we can do that. I think it's good. I just don't want to like just have a picture of like Bill Crystal in the background or something.
No. I don't do. Who needs Bill Crystal? You're just a more handsome version, you know?
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, you know. So give me a second. I'm a boomer. I don't know if other people have this problem, but I can't have my camera open on two applications, so I have to deactivate it.
Can I give you a tip on that? This is a really good tip I learned that helped me. There's this program called Snap Camera, and it's something I use. It's actually a Snapchat filter that I use for stream. It means that if randomly I could put on like cat ears or something, right? Like you would see it on stream. But it also allows you to use Snap Camera as an output, but you can output it into multiple programs at once. So you could have it on stream, you can have it on Discord, you can have it on Whereby, all at the same time. And it has allowed me to like host panels a lot more like better. So it's
and what
free
is it,
on
Snap Camera?
Snap Camera. It's free online. Simple, really easy to use, and then you also get fun filters. I have one where just Twitch Prime just comes up on stream and gives me the big
awesome.
bucks.
All right. I'm ready. Let's be done being nice to each other. I'm gonna defend criticizing Trump, and you're going to celebrate Trump for bombing brown people in Syria. I think that's the direction we're going to go here.
Sure.
So you could give the intro if you want. I kind of explained why we're doing this, but feel free.
So there was also, I will say, like, the left does give me shit. I just wanted to say, but like today, like I had a right winger just say like I'm a pedophile supporter, which I mean is only connected to like, you know, the historically with the gays and the advertisement around that. So I mean, I don't know. Recently,
they're saying that because of a specific person that's been on your show. That's my guess.
Who maybe it has to do with Vosh or Destiny or any of that.
I wasn't going to say his name, but yeah, I mean, I see this is, and I'll say this to the right and the left. I got my introduction like basically doing You're in Prime Case panel. I didn't know anyone in the Twitch community whatsoever. So when I debate someone or I'm on a panel with someone, I get all kinds of people like, did you know this person said this in the past? Did you hear this heinous stuff they said? And my feeling on it's always, if I didn't see it, it's not that I don't believe it. I just don't judge people based on things that I haven't seen, because anyone could say anything. I'm not going to believe people that tell me you're a pedophile supporter, because I know that's horseshit, and even if it wasn't, I haven't personally heard you say that shit, so why would I judge you?
Yeah, I have no reason to believe. I've had that actually happen recently. People have tried to get me to stop like platforming Kevin Castley, which is somebody I know you've had disagreements with politically.
A legitimate neocon. Yeah,
he was like yeah, he was like a pretty open, like I would call him like a liberal hawk might be accurate, but I think he would disagree with me on this, but I do think you could actually classify him as just a straight up neoconservative.
He definitely is.
Due to his like beliefs about movements like Black Lives Matter and like his personal disdain for communism. Like
I thought he straight up said that on the panel I was on with him. I thought he said he was a neocon.
Maybe. I'm trying to remember, but there is a distinct difference between liberal hawks and neoconservatism. There is a
now,
ideological
come on, Dylan, don't get out of it. We know you're the party of Bill Kristol and Donald Rumsfeld and the Cheneys.
Here's a good place to start for everyone. So basically, recently he basically said that I align myself with neocons in much of my foreign policy, and I, you know, as somebody who's like pretty deep in IR, I disagree deeply with that. And I think a good place to start would be, what is your like definition for like neoconservatism, the movement of neoconservatism, which like started in the 60s after the Vietnam War?
You know, I'm not even going to go back that far. Like, these labels are mostly all horseshit anyways. When I'm saying that to you, I'm saying that basically you're taking a hawkish foreign policy. And when I consider neocons, I think of George W. Bush. I think of Cheney. I think of Rumsfeld. That's what I'm talking about.
Okay, so you don't mean like the ideological like foundations of neoconservatism.
No, I clearly, like, all tongue-in-cheek aside, I understand that you're not a conservative. I'm just saying the worst part of neocons was the interventionism, and that's where you've aligned, at least in the issue of Syria. And I'll bet you'll align that way the next time that Joe Biden or some Democrat administration tells us we need to have another foreign regime change war. Well, that's
I would also like to bring up that like neoconservatism has deep in its roots is a deep hatred of like anything socialist and communist, because like it spiraled out of the, like, of course, the Vietnam protest movement. They saw it as like weakness and pacifism growing in the Democratic Party. Like along the lines of like people, for example, like Mike Revell, who I had the pleasure of working for and sadly recently passed away.
Yeah.
And so like personally, like using Syria as an example to tie me to that doesn't make sense when Rojava is like many of the ideological foundations of Rojava. They see it as a socialist project. And it follows in like the roots of like socialist thought leaders, and they're running off of like women's liberation and stuff like that. And so saying that it's like definitely there are like, of course, allegations of ties to the PKK, which is like a communist movement within like Turkey that the Turkish government views as a terrorist organization, right? And even the United States views the PKK as a terrorist organization. So for somebody to like say, well, you have you're neoconservatism. And the one like example people always use is Syria. Doesn't really make sense when I'm supporting like Rojava, which is a socialist project, and neoconservatism is defined by a hatred for socialism and communism.
Look, I'm using it. I'm not like, I can't even tell you what a conservative is anymore. Believe it or not, if I'm arguing, you know this, if I'm arguing with someone that I'm pro-gay marriage, guess what I hear from a bunch of people on the right? You're not a real conservative. So I don't really give a shit about the label. When I'm calling you a neoconservative, I'm merely making the point. Here's the stance that I'm coming from. So I'm 37. I kind of mentioned this to the audience. I'm 37. My first foray into, I was a senior in high school doing the morning announcements when 9/11 happened. I didn't know shit about politics. As a 17-year-old, my concerns in life was trying to find a girlfriend and finding the next case of beer. That was about it. I got into the cheapest state school that I could, that was 20 minutes down the road from where I grew up, and I've lived in the same area my whole life. Like, I was never into politics. Once I started to look into the Iraq war and the bullshit around that, I started to become very heavily critical of our foreign policy and interventionism. And I had what I thought was a healthy skepticism of authority. I had all these friends on the left that were with me, like we were marching against the Iraq war and stuff like that. Those people say I've changed. But in reality, what happened was it only took 8 years of Barack Obama, you know, the Nobel Peace winner that was dropping bombs left and right in all these countries and engaging in regime change wars. And then Donald Trump.
Henry Kissinger also got a Nobel Peace Prize, by the way.
That's right.
For him being a part of ending, of course, the war, our involvement in the war in Vietnam, which, that's the thing about the Nobel Peace Prize. Sorry to go on a quick tangent, but the problem I've always had with it is you can award it, but you can't take it back. And so, like, once you've got it, like, if I got the Nobel Peace Prize, I can go, like, kill, like, 20 babies, and, like, I still have it because it's not an award you can take back. I always thought that it would make sense to have a retraction process so you don't stain, like, what should be, like, an amazing award to have. Like, the reputation of it.
Right. Yeah, it's ridiculous. Special shout out to Rainbow Punk saying, he's my age. Why does he look so bad? Are you talking about me or Dylan? I think Dylan looks fine.
Probably
Anyways,
both.
Moving on. I'm married. I don't give a shit how I look, so who cares? I take the Larry David approach. Did you ever watch The Curb where he's wearing the big woman's hat?
Yeah, well,
and Jeff's like, what the fuck are you wearing a woman's hat for?
I'm just treating it more like a joke now. I'm wearing this shirt today. I love
Oh,
Dills.
nice.
Yeah.
You like Dylan's. Nice. But yeah, anyways, all it took was, you know, Obama being pro-war, and then Trump, even though I think that the most shameful stuff that Trump did in his presidency were a lot of the decisions he had in Syria, but even him paying lip service to wanting to pull troops out of places like Syria and Afghanistan, all of a sudden, that's all it took for the most anti-war people I know to become the most pro-war people I know. And now all of a sudden, we can never leave Afghanistan. We got to keep, the only time we were proud of Trump's when he was bombing Syria. And it's just bullshit. And I'm sad to see the one issue that I really agreed with progressives on, all of a sudden, half of them are just like, nope, we're just new Cheneys and Rumsfelds. And I'm especially someone that I actually enjoy talking to you like you. It's always a sore spot that you're pro-interventionism in Syria.
So
I just think it's horseshit.
I just want to be clear that I think that, let's say that I started saying, and this is something I believe, I'm considered by many people, even to the disdain of local activists, and I've gotten in trouble a few times for it, as being a pro-gun Democrat. I'm somebody who believes that the Second Amendment is something that was there for a reason. I'm not, Second Amendment for self-defense. I'm Second Amendment for its original intention, as in being a check on power of the United States government. This is something that has gotten me in trouble with a lot of people. If somebody were to then walk up to me and, look, he's a Trumpy. He's a Trumper. He likes the Second Amendment. I would find that be extremely reductive, and I think you would agree with me, right? And so when I hear, like, Dylan's a war hawk or he's a neocon because of my opinions on Syria, it kind of always takes me aback because my record, I think, is pretty clear. I worked for Mike Revell. He's the person who read the Pentagon Papers into the record, and that was a
question about that when you're done here. But go.
Sure.
Yeah.
Who read the Pentagon Papers into record. Even if I disagree with them on stuff like the 9/11 Commission and other certain foreign policy aspects, I think him being part of the conversation in 2020 was important. I worked for Michaela Wilkes, who is somebody who is definitely less of an interventionist. I advised Jill Carter on somebody who was less of an interventionist. Now, I will say, to be completely transparent, that I was the person who was able to convince Michaela Wilkes when she was running for Congress to support, to be against Trump's withdrawal from northeastern Syria. I was the person who made that happen. But if we look at my modern foreign policy positions, I opposed the war in Iraq. I support withdrawing from Afghanistan, even if I think we did it incorrectly. I still support the withdrawal continuing. I want to end the blockade of Yemen, and one of my biggest issues during the 2020 election was me bringing up how we need to stop supporting the war in Yemen. I want to end our blockade of Cuba. I am somebody who is generally, if you look at much of our foreign policy, my foreign policy opinions across the Middle East, I don't think, and I'm somebody who's scared of a new Cold War with China, which is something that I think you're somebody who wants to be very aggressive on China. I have I would say, a more balanced approach of I want to check China's like stuff in the South China Sea, but I do think we should continue trade with them in certain areas. I have a certain balanced approach because I, as somebody who leans towards liberal internationalism, know that a lack of trade, it makes it more likely for a conflict to occur because there's less like disincentives to going into conflict. And so I think when you look at the entirety of my opinions, and then you see me saying, I think a presence in northeastern Syria makes sense strategically and to keeping the peace when we look at the effectiveness of that military operation, looking in that and then saying, war, look at them, war hawk, neocon, etc., is reductionist to what my foreign policy opinions are. It would be like somebody saying Dylan says the Second Amendment means something and it's actually important. Guess he's a conservative now. It'd be ridiculous.
Okay, so one, I have a question, and then I'll respond to this. What was Mike Revell's thoughts on intervention in Syria?
Mike Revell most certainly disagreed with me on Syria. Yep.
Yeah, I thought so. And look, I don't like a lot of Mike Revell's. This all started, by the way, kind of talking about a video you did on Jimmy Dore, which I did watch the video. And I don't think you were wrong on Jimmy Dore being incorrect in a lot of the things in the video that you did. But I don't give a shit.
The thing about the Supreme Court just made no sense to me.
Right. But there's different ways to be wrong. There are ways to be wrong strategically or, in predictions and things like that. And then there's ways to be wrong sort of ideologically. So in the video, what you're basically pointing out is, Jimmy Dore's positions were wrong on a bunch of strategic shit that he wanted for the Democratic Party to do. I don't, and predictions. I don't give a shit because I disagree with Jimmy Dore politically. It's who I wanted to see win anyway, so it didn't really matter to me. But I think it's funny, the vitriol that Jimmy Dore gets, largely that what this started was Jimmy Dore and Aaron Matei getting shit for being anti-war in Syria, anti-interventionism in Syria. So just to address your point real quick here,
I don't think that's exactly where it started. I think it started with forced to vote. I think because what originally happened was forced to vote, and then but down the line, people basically brought in the second part, because at that point, what happened is people started doing clip chimping and digging up old clips to try to find anything they could throw at the opposing person.
Talk about force the vote too, but maybe that's a better conversation for another day. I think that Jimmy Dore is someone that sticks to his principles, even if sometimes that it's not the most practical thing to do. So sometimes it's true in politics that you have to kind of forego your ultimate goal to have some sort of practical compromise in the short term. And I respect people, though, that are willing to stick to their principles in all cases. And I think that Jimmy Dore is one of those people. Now, to address your point real quick specifically, if I called myself a fiscal conservative, right? And then once Trump got elected, I was like, I have no problem with Trump massively blowing out the budget. You might say, Rob, I don't think you're a fiscal conservative. I think you're a big government person because you're cheering for these big omnibus bills that Trump's signing for. And I would say, but wait, I was against the spending under Obama. I was against the spending under Bush. I was against the spending under Clinton. You would say, great. But it's still not who you are entirely if you're okay for massive spending in certain circumstances. I say the same thing about the war in Syria. Like, yeah, you adapted basically what is the mainstream Democrat line on most of these foreign policy decisions with a few exceptions. And yet you're still in line with the Democrats when it comes to their war hawkishness, particularly surrounding Syria, Russia, and places like that. And I still think, regardless, I think that you're being duped by the same intelligence agencies that lied to us about things like the war in Iraq, in Libya, about things in Afghanistan, about Yemen, other places. And I think that it's ironic that you can see through the bullshit in those other cases, but when it comes to Syria, you just take them hook, line, and sinker.
So to be clear, when it comes to Syria, I always supported the project in Rojava, and I've always had the position of maintaining our military presence to the disdain of some of my colleagues. And there's a paper trail to prove it. I supported it under Trump, and I supported it under Biden. This has been a consistent policy I've always held. I can send you the press release that was released by the campaign that I worked for at the time, stating our position that I had to convince them to take, which I put myself at risk by taking.
When was that paper?
That was in
roughly year.
That was probably 2019, early or late 2019.
So again, this is the official Democrat position, right? This is Obama's position. It was Hillary Clinton's
and Republican position.
Exactly.
So this was a position held. Wait. This is a position held by basically everyone except Donald Trump. And so for somebody to say, "Well, Dylan, see, you're just taking the Democrat line." Well, I'm taking the line that everybody took. It'd be like me saying, "Rob, you're just taking the deep state line. Why? Because you believe in a round earth, right?" I would feel that to be a little ridiculous because you would just say, well, I just believe the sky is blue. This is something that I believe to be correct. I believe with the majority of Americans and the majority of basically everybody that was a bad move.
Okay, but here's the thing. The same position that you're articulating now could have been said about the Iraq war. Everybody agreed with it.
I don't think it could have. Because
a very small handful disagreed, but almost everyone, the Republicans agreed, the Democrats agreed, the media almost all agreed, the international community agreed.
Oh, okay. I thought you meant about the strategic. Well, I disagree, because the difference is there was a actual strong left contingent within Congress, including Nancy Pelosi, who voted against the Iraq War, who voted against invading Iraq, who was against the Iraq War. There was an actual political resistance to that. There was nothing like that for the withdrawal of northeastern Syria, saying that was a good move. Everyone from Brett McGurk to everyone else thought it was a bad move. The conditions of the Iraq War and the ARC maintaining a presence in Syria are completely different when it comes to the troops at play and the expansion of conflict. Because our withdrawal from northeastern Syria expanded the war in Syria. It did not reduce the war in Syria. Where an invasion into Iraq started a war, it did not reduce or end a war.
So let's talk about the withdrawal then. First off, you won't get me to defend that Trump was a super shrewd expert when it came to a lot of foreign policy. I think Trump was an idea person, but he needed people around him to do the specifics. And he certainly was ham-fisted in a lot of his foreign policy decisions, even if I agreed with them in spirit. But let's talk specifically about the withdrawal. You are well studied in Syria. How many troops did we have in Syria before Trump said that he wanted to withdraw?
We had, well, it depends. Do you mean contractors, or do you mean specific, like, special forces? Because
when you say that you were against his pullout, you're talking about not contractors. You're talking about special forces.
We had about a couple thousand, I believe.
How many did we have after the complete withdrawal?
After the complete withdrawal? Well, that's the thing. It was never a complete withdrawal. It was a movement of troops. Because he 180'd on his position.
No, because they lied to him. Because the generals lied to him. That's why. As they've admitted. That they lied to Trump. Regardless of what you think of Trump, he is the civilian leader of the military. He was duly elected. And generals publicly admitted during his administration that they lied to Trump so that when he pulled troops out of Syria, we didn't actually pull all of the troops out. We actually left about 800 or 900 there.
Okay.
So one, the fact that doesn't outrage you shows that it's
okay, to be clear, I do not think generals should lie to the president. But of course, it'd be like if I said right now, people stormed the Capitol on January 6th, and you didn't burst like into anger. You'd more be thinking, how is that relevant, right? So I don't understand how that's relevant to why I would think pulling out was like a good or a bad move.
It's relevant for two reasons. Because one, it shows the hawkish nature that you're supporting a conflict that literally generals are lying to continue to be involved in. And secondly, I talked to you before the troop withdrawal. We talked about Syria for over a year now, off and on. We talked about it. And one of the things you told me was
we did not talk before the troop withdrawal.
What's that?
We did not talk before the troop withdrawal.
Oh, we talked before. Okay, you're probably right. We talked before we knew. We talked under the auspices of Trump had removed the troops, right? And then we later found out that wasn't true, that the generals lied and a lot of the troops stayed there. And in that conversation, in fact, I believe
when did we first talk?
I think the conversation I'm talking about, was literally the night before the election, because I did a 24-hour show. You called in at like 3 a.m. and we talked for like an hour and a half, and we talked a lot about Syria. And you had told me, you had outlined this situation where you were like, it's not even like we have tens of thousands of troops on the ground. All we needed was a couple hundred, because literally their job was just protecting the Kurds so that the Kurds could have these prison camps that ISIS was being detained in. And the humorous thing was that what you were suggesting to me that night is actually what happened. We did leave a couple hundred troops there. That's exactly what happened. And yet you said that all this bad shit happened anyway.
That's true, but it's like, that's not exactly true. And so let me explain why. We did keep troops within Syria as there was a withdrawal, and eventually there was reversals on exactly how big the withdrawal was going to be, a total withdrawal. Well, you can say that was because of lies. It doesn't really matter to like the point I'm trying to make here. The troops that were moved from the border regions. You can have a bunch of troops in Timbuktu or in the middle of northeastern Syria, but where those troops mattered was on the border with Turkey, because the removal of those troops from the border of Turkey meant that it basically gave a green light for Turkey to invade. And so if my main reason for not wanting to withdraw troops was to stop another conflict from spiraling out of control and having Operation Peace Spring, which I believe is I'm trying to remember if that's the invasion of a friend or quote unquote liberation of a friend or not. But anyway, the operation names doesn't matter. That was the reason why I was against it. Those troops did not stay on the border with Turkey. They moved away. It was so quick that there were still opened Coke bottles on bases on the border.
But I mean, according to the article I'm reading, that talked about what's the name of this? Ambassador Jim Jeffrey talked about this, and there was also a general that was stationed there that talked about this. They said that the reason that they left troops was specifically to protect the Kurds from the Turks.
Yeah, certain areas, but not where it mattered. It'd be like if, for example, I said, like, let's say I moved all the troops from the border of the North Korean DMZ, and I moved them all to, like, the tip of Korea, or the middle of Korea. And then North Korea invaded and took, like, 10 to 20 miles of South Korean territory. Now, I could say that we did keep troops in there to protect the Kurds, but we should have kept them on the border if we knew that us withdrawing those troops were going to cause an invasion and spiral out into conflict. We did remove our troops from the border of northeastern Syria. That is undeniably true, or they would have been killed by Turkish-backed terrorists, which ended up pulling Kurdish politicians out of cars and executing them on the side of the road.
Yeah, so nonetheless, then it seems weird that these generals would purposely disobey Trump, but do so in a way that didn't even benefit the allies that they claimed that they wanted to help.
Well, the thing is, it did benefit them in a certain way because that meant the invasion wouldn't be as bad, but the invasion shouldn't have happened in the first place, right? It'd be like if I was like, my job is to be somebody's bodyguard, right? And so somebody's about to throw a punch, and I move out of the way, and they punch them, but then when the second punch comes, I move back in front of them. I shouldn't have moved in the first place. It's good that I moved back in the way to stop the second punch, but we shouldn't have even had the first punch happen in the first place.
So here's the problem, right? So in general, here's what the problem is. The position that you take literally is the same position that every neocon takes in every foreign intervention war that we get to. So they might even admit, well, yeah, we shouldn't have been there in the first place, but now we can't leave. Afghanistan, it's the same argument that they're making in Afghanistan. I'm not saying you're making this argument, but it's the same argument we heard many Democrats and certainly almost the entire Republican contingency make, which is, well, regardless of what you think about the situation regarding how long we've been in Afghanistan and the circumstances getting involved there, we can't pull out now because if we do, our allies will suffer. It was the same argument that was made in Iraq. It's the same argument that's made every time that we invade a country and then we say, well, we can't pull out. How long would you recommend that we keep troops in Syria in order to ensure stability for the Kurds?
Well, first, can I address the classification of my argument? And I'll be blunt. I don't care. If neocons said they were against pedophilia, I'd agree that I'm against pedophilia. Just because they took a position doesn't mean I'm going to take the opposite position just to be a contrarian. That just feels like that feels like outrage politics. Like if George Bush came out and he endorsed Medicare for all, that doesn't mean now I'm going to be like, well, now I'm for completely deregulated health. No, this is ridiculous. It would just be me just virtue signaling at that point if I didn't stay consistent to my beliefs about this particular conflict. And I would say that the conditions of northeastern Syria and the conflict in Afghanistan, the conditions are completely different as to why I want to withdraw. Number one, the length of our stay in northeastern Syria and Afghanistan is different. 20 years is a lot different than 3 to 4. The amount of troops that are needed for our stay in Afghanistan is completely different than the amount of troops that were needed, which again, we both agreed were a few hundred on the border regions to stop what happened. Completely different on that. The amount of support domestically for the continuation of those troops being in northeastern Syria in comparison to Afghanistan, completely different. Even if the majority of Afghans do not want the Taliban to retake the country, the majority of Afghans don't really want American troops to stay there longer than what was necessary up to this point. They want them gone. Where northeastern Syria, when we talk about SDF territory, I don't think that's the same case. You can talk about general Syrian polling, but but the problem is that's general Syrian territory. You're going to be polling Alawites and different. It's not the same. But
the same would be said of Iraq, Afghanistan, etc. Like there are specific people they're going to say, "Oh no, we feel that we'd be punished if you pull out, so we want you to stay." Afghanistan would be the same thing. If you look at certain groups that have allied with the United States, if we pull out, those groups probably, if you polled them, would say, "No, don't pull out." Right? Even if the general population of Afghanistan would say, we don't want you here anymore. The same would be true in Syria.
Feminists are particularly terrified of the withdrawal right now.
Okay. But so again, this just proves my point. It's not just that you're saying, well, just because neocons agree, I agree. Just because neocons agree doesn't mean that it's the wrong position to take. What I'm saying is when we have a disaster, would you agree that the intel agencies have lied us into war after war in the past 30 years in our country?
I would say politicians have.
You don't think the intel communities like Iraq, you don't think they had any part in that?
The problem with Iraq was it wasn't necessarily that the CIA was like lying to Bush. It was Bush and Cheney lied to the American people by cherry picking large amounts of raw data. Let's say that I gave you like 1 million different pieces of data. Like I had tons and tons of data in front of me. And I could, like, you can tell me, like, I could cherry pick data to make any argument for anything in the world. Because what happened is they would say, well, we have this unconfirmed report here, and this unconfirmed report here about a meeting in Prague between Saddam Hussein officials and terrorists, and, well, we don't have a lot of information to prove it. Run with it. It's true now. To the public, we're just going to say this happened. That it was the cherry picking of data that was the problem with Iraq. It wasn't necessarily the CIA walked up to Bush and said, Saddam Hussein met with people in Prague. We know this happened. So it's the use of data in a manipulative manner that was the problem with the Iraq War.
Okay, it's kind of a point that's not really important. Whether it's our politicians,
well, it is important
our intel
because it's that's where we need to know where to put the blame, right?
Okay, but even still, regardless of who it is, it's clear that leaders in this country, whether it be in the intel community or our politicians, are willing to lie us into war.
Yes,
right. And I will say, just to push back on the intel community being innocent here, we've seen the propensity for we've seen a propensity of them when they think that they have an axe to grind, that they'll come out, they'll leak information, they'll talk to the public, they'll go to their allies in the press and say all kinds of shit. So if they said, wait a minute, the Bush administration's cherry picking the data we gave to them to basically lie us into this war, I bet that they would have spoke up if they felt strongly that it was a policy that they didn't recommend.
Well, if your argument is that there should have been more whistleblowers during the Iraq War and saying that this is a misrepresentation of data, okay. But I just disagree with the classification that it was the intel agencies like directly communicating to the American people, like telling them lies. It was the cherry picking of data that is what was the problem with the Iraq War about unconfirmed reports. Because you can really make an argument that anyone's a terrorist if you just take a bunch of raw data. Like if I got enough raw data and I said, Rob Noor was on a panel with a Proud Boy here, and Rob Noor was at this place here, I could cherry pick enough data to basically make you look like the next, like, I don't know, Al-Qaeda member. If I do it, hey, look at his beard, he's growing his beard out. I mean, like, I could do enough to do that. Now, who do we put the blame on? Do we put the blame on the people who gave me all the data, or the person who cherry picked it to make it look dishonest?
I mean, I don't know what to say. It's right.
Separate.
There's tons of books on color revolutions, all sorts of shady shit done by the CIA in countries.
Well, yeah, I'm
in
not
South
saying the CIA is
America,
innocent. I just disagree with the specific classification about the Iraq War.
Nonetheless, so if we can admit that whatever group you say, that there are people strong enough in leadership in this country to consistently lie us into disastrous foreign policy wars,
okay.
I think that it's important then, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me 14 times, shame on me. And so we need to have a strict policy that says this interventionism must stop unless certain very high certainty threshold things occur. For example, we should not be dropping bombs on a country until they meet a very high threshold they did something incredibly heinous, and we are almost completely certain beyond a reasonable doubt that they did it. Instead, what we saw, like in 2018, and you tell me if you were for this or against this, we saw Trump bomb Syria 2 days after an alleged chemical weapons attack in Aleppo. 2 days before anyone got to investigate it, we were dropping bombs in Syria. Is that something you supported?
No, I did not support the strike. It also was like on an empty base, so it didn't even it didn't really matter. But anyway, so the thing is, my support for what happened for Operation Inherent Resolve is not based off of CIA data. It's not based on American government statements. It's based on a lot of information gathered from the Rojava Information Center. A great example of this would be after the withdrawal from northeastern Syria, anti-ISIS operations decreased by 75%. Kurdish politicians were dragged out of cars and shot, and tons and tons of refugees were produced, destabilizing the area more. Now, if my goal is for less war, if my goal is for a stable northeastern Syria where they can contain some of the most radicalized foreign imported jihadists, like jihadists from France, the UK, the United States, my goal is for these people to be contained, for anti-ISIS operations to be successful, and for wars not to expand, then if me withdrawing 100 troops causes a war to expand, then that's why I'm opposing it. I'm not basing it off of CIA data. I'm not even basing it off the gas attacks. Talking about the gas attacks is pointless because northeastern Syria has nothing to do with deposing Assad. We're not going to be able, the SDF is not going to be able to depose Assad. I never had that idea in my mind. The SDF has under no idea that they're going to be able to overthrow the government of Assad. Now, if you want to talk about 2011 to 2013, 2014, the FSA, Operation Timber Sycamore, that's a completely different than Operation Inherent Resolve. So
But there's several things to say about this. One, right? Like we've talked about this in the past, and you admit if we go through this for an hour and a half, what happened last time was you admitted that a lot of the reason that the U.S. military there is to kind of provide pressure on Assad and on Russia. It's not just about fighting ISIS or al-Nusra. It's about providing pressure on Assad and Russia. And so the idea that we should keep troops there to protect the Kurds, but also that risk escalating tensions with a nuclear armed superpower seems to be very dangerous to me. And it also, like, just real quick, a couple other things. The idea that, well, we could prevent war by having troops there. Again, this is a rationale that we could use in almost any country that has any sort of extremism. We can make the same argument about Saudi Arabia. Well, if we station troops in Saudi Arabia, if all of a sudden we put boots on the ground, theoretically, we could de-escalate a lot of the extremism of the al-Saud, the House of Saud that's running that country. This interventionism is nonsense. And the problem is, right, we see what happens like in Afghanistan.
Can I respond to that
so if we adapt
first?
Just real quick, super quick. We might be in Syria if we adapt your policy for the next 20 years, and we'll be having this conversation when my son's graduating from high school. You know, I'll be in a wheelchair. I assume you'll still have your hair, and you're going to be like, "Well, we can't pull out yet. We can't pull out yet. We need to keep fighting." It's horse shit that's used by warmongers that lie to us all the time to ensure that we're never able to stop invading these countries.
So, withdrawing from northeastern Syria increased tensions with the Russian Federation. There was more instances of American and Russian troops getting into engagements, and even reports of sometimes, I think, firefights. Not between necessarily American and Russian troops, but during these instances, because the lines of conflict and the lines bordering what is Assad government-controlled territory by the Syrian Arab Army, was controlled territory by the SDF, was controlled territory by the FSA and Turkish-backed groups, those lines got blurred with the Turkish invasion. And then when the Russian patrols started to happen between SDF territory and Turkish-backed militia territory, American and Russian military escorts met up and had confrontations. Those meant more spark points to cause conflict, more areas where mistakes could be made.
Conflict where? In Syria?
Yeah, in Syria. More conflict.
Right, that's because we left troops there.
No, because we withdrew. That wouldn't have happened if we didn't withdraw. Now, you could say, well, if we took all the troops out, then there couldn't have been any confrontations. Okay, right. But I could easily as much say, if we just kept the troops there, that wouldn't have happened either, because then there wouldn't have been those Russian patrols to begin with.
And like we could see, first off, to the people in your chat saying, well, we have bases in Saudi Arabia. Sure, that's different than attacking the government of Saudi Arabia, as we've done to the government of Assad multiple times. And you can say that Inherent Resolve is just about fighting al-Nusra and ISIS, but the story is ridiculous. It doesn't even make sense on face value, as I've gone through with you before.
Wait. Operation Inherent Resolve, the vast majority of it was doing that. You can say that there's also strategic reasons to want to put pressure on Assad, but that was the vast majority of the reason. That's where the vast majority of the strikes were targeted.
That was the reason.
Yeah.
Right, but we were still attacking Assad's interests and attacking Assad and putting pressure on Assad the entire time. Like if I say, oh, Dylan, I'm going to put, some of my friends armed around your home to make sure that we attack bad guys that are coming after you, but I'm also going to apply pressure on you. It's still applying pressure on you.
Yeah, I'm not saying that, but
it's easy. Right.
Okay. So can I respond to the? Okay.
Sure.
So it was a classification of like increasing tensions with Russia. What was the second point you made? I'm sorry, you made like 3 points, and that's why I wanted to address these one by one because I'm gonna forget. Okay.
Well, the increasing tensions with a nuclear
Russia. What was the second? What was the second one?
This is the same excuse that's used that says that to prevent war, we need to have boots on the ground, because if we don't have boots on the ground, there'll be increased escalation.
But okay. In certain instances, it's true. In certain instances, it's not true. For example, if there was an instance where between Pakistan and India, they had extremely high tensions, and the United Nations said, you know what, we're going to have a UN mission to have troops on the border here, so it's less likely that there's going to be conflict. The UN has done this multiple times before. There could be instances where that can be 100% justified to stop conflict. If the removal of a certain factor means that an invasion occurs, then it's very evident that, yes, it did increase conflict. It did increase war. I mean, we can have this debate on whether it would work in Afghanistan or whether it would work in Iraq, but this is just true right now. We saw it happen. We saw the Turks move in their military as Kurdish politicians were dragged out of cars and shot and beaten, as civilians were artillery striked. We saw this happen with our eyes. We saw people get killed and had their bodies sold back to their families so that we have proper burials.
But we could make this same argument in Yemen. We can make this same argument in Saudi Arabia. You can make this argument in Iraq.
How could we make that argument in Yemen?
But for example, we see the abuse that's going on in Yemen, so we could say we're going to violate Yemen's sovereignty by sending boots on the ground to make sure that we're avoiding conflict escalation that's coming from the Sauds bombing them and things like that.
But that doesn't make sense, because if we want to get people to the negotiating table, how is us giving the Saudis leverage, getting people to the negotiating table, or stopping conflict from occurring, or bombs from being dropped, or the conflict from being expanded? How would that be giving the Saudis leverage? If we give the Saudis weapons, those weapons are then used in Yemen. That gives them leverage.
It's very similar, right? It's very similar to the situation we see in Syria, right?
The difference is that was an active conflict zone. The border between Turkey and the SDF, there was no invasion. There was active conflict.
And why was there no invasion? Because the United States
was there, yes.
Right. So we could say the same thing about Yemen, right? And here's what's going on. This is the position that we have, the official position.
You can't say the same thing, because there's war right now and we're participating in it.
Listen, this is the argument that we're making simultaneously. One, we're in this very important alliance called NATO, and one of our allies is Turkey, that we're honor-bound and treaty-bound if they are attacked to defend them militaristically. That's what a military alliance is. So that's our relationship with Turkey. So much so, there are allies that we actually
Do you support withdrawal from NATO, by the way?
I support either kicking Turkey out or withdrawing.
So kick Turkey out and you would stay in NATO?
Yeah.
Warhawk.
But I think that it's antiquated, and I think that the encirclement, we need to drastically reduce the mission of NATO, because it's all about encircling Russia primarily, which is especially odd considering China is a far bigger geopolitical threat. But just real quick, Turkey's so much of our ally that we station nuclear weapons in Turkey. But at the same time, we're told we have to perpetually stay in Syria because our ally Turkey is going to commit genocide against the Kurds as soon as we leave. So instead of saying... Right. So instead of saying, okay, maybe the solution is we just tell Turkey, if you do this shit, we're coming after you. And then we pull our troops out. Because what ends up happening is we see over and over, we're told by the intelligence agencies and we're told by our political class, oh, this is just about fighting ISIS. It's not about Assad. And yet at the same time, we continue to violate Syria's sovereignty by having, now the sole reason that we have troops there is because, well, sorry, Syria, we have to keep troops in your country because if we don't, then an outside country will invade your sovereign area and commit genocide against other people that are our allies, who also happen to be against you, Assad.
Okay, there's a lot saying that. Okay, first off, the reason why I voted for Biden in large part because of his position on Turkey. Because he has been a lot more aggressive on the issue of Turkey and their actions in Syria and across the globe. In fact, while on the campaign trail, he openly stated about how we need to basically be more of a check on Turkey, and Turkey's actions in Syria, in Libya, and around the region are destabilizing. Trump, on the other hand, did what Turkey wanted. He did what Turkey wanted by withdrawing from northeastern Syria. He was actively very friendly with Recep Erdogan. He was very friendly with the man. Erdogan and Trump had a very close personal relationship. They were friendly. I can't think of a single time that Trump acted against the interests of the Turkish government. Can you?
When he was, it might not have been specifically against the Turkish government, but his criticisms of NATO and not wanting to fund it as much is certainly something that I don't think Turkey would have been a fan of. And I also think that his position sort of on refugee status in the United...
But that had nothing to do with Turkey. That just had to do with him being more isolationist in nature. Nothing to do with Turkey.
Matter if the policy was specifically him saying Turkey. It's something that Turkey certainly wouldn't have wanted. And the same would be true of Trump's feelings on refugees and things like that. Turkey famously wants these refugees to other countries to be able to take so many. They've threatened multiple times if they don't get their way to unleash scores of refugees into countries in Europe. And so Trump's sort of stance against that would have been something they didn't like.
How?
But I'm not here to defend
what do you mean? What do you mean he wouldn't have liked that? Because that's a bargaining chip against Europe. That means nothing to the United States. It's not like the Turks are going to give the refugees boats and sail them to the United States. That means nothing to Trump.
Trump was very vocal with his endorsement of Brexit and sort of the idea that these sort of like immigration policies that were occurring in Europe were similar to the United States, and he opposed them. I mean, he certainly was buddies with Nigel Farage and a bunch of other people that were leading Brexit. That's something that Turkey went, but it doesn't. It's a moot point.
Is there any time where he has actually like confronted Turkey on any of their policies like Biden has?
No. Okay. I can't think of anything. I can't say that I'll say this. I'll take your word because I don't have any proof that he did. It could be that he did and I'm not aware of it, but I'll take your word that I'm certainly not aware. But the point is, I'm not defending Trump on his stance in the Syria situation anyways.
Yeah.
The whole thing is, I heavily criticized him the 2 times that he bombed them. I also criticized that he didn't pull the troops out sooner. So, I thought it was Trump's most shameful point in his presidency, bombing people without justification or proof that they deserve to be bombed. In fact, after the 2017 bombing, the reason that Trump bombed, according to General Mattis, was not because they used chlorine gas, but because allegedly they used sarin gas, which Mattis then had to come out 6 months later and say they still, at that point, 6 months later, had no proof that Assad ever used sarin gas.
Can I ask you a question?
And I don't...
Did Assad gas his own people?
Probably at some point.
Okay. I mean, can we say that that he did? I mean, like, if I had, like, let's say, like, I had a list of, like, here's 30 to 40 documented, like, UN instances of investigations into murders that this person did. Like, could you not look at that list and say, yes, this person has done this? Definitely when we know that he's given up chemical weapons before. We know he had the capacity to have chemical weapons, like, and many of these chemical weapons could only have been deployed by helicopter, meaning it was impossible for rebels to deploy them. And many of these,
like in Aleppo, is that what you're talking about?
I'm talking about the 40 instance. I don't even talk about a specific. This would be like me, like, saying, like, I need to defend a certain instance in, like, the Holocaust, right? We're in this instance in the Holocaust, in this particular concentration camp, somebody. Well, no. Let me explain it. I'm not saying these things are the same level. I'm just saying, if somebody was to find it, let's say somebody found a problem with one report on a certain concentration camp, right? And then I was like, okay, that doesn't really matter. Look at all the other evidence about all these other concentration camps. That's all I need to do. I don't need to, like, spend the 10 to 20 to 30 to 40, 50, 60 minutes debating, like, Jackson Hinkle, who, you know, takes Assad lobby money, like, to, like, try to, like, go.
He crushed Bosch in that debate.
I mean, not really. He didn't know how Russian helicopters worked.
Close.
He doesn't understand how chemical weapons worked. He didn't understand any of that nonsense.
Let me address, and let me kind of show you in a way, like, the point you're making is actually the exact opposite. Just because leaders or countries have done shitty things in the past doesn't give us an excuse to attack them based on a specific incident that we're saying they did.
I'm not justifying any attack on Syria.
Okay.
I didn't ask that.
All right,
I just asked you a simple question
of
whether he gassed his own people, and you said probably.
Yeah, probably he has. Okay. It's irrelevant because again,
well, I'm asking. I was kind of looking for a yes or no. Like, probably is kind of like a weird.
Well, how do I know for certain? I would say he probably has. I could say the incidents that are the most talked about, for example, the issue of 2017 having sarin gas. We now have the general that was in charge of that response saying, actually, we have no evidence that they use sarin gas. Then in the Aleppo situation, we could see that whistleblowers have suggested strongly that actually gas wasn't used that time. Now, just saying, but they've said it happened 40 times, therefore it must have happened. I don't know that that's necessarily proof. I could say that I definitively think Assad's a really shitty person, and he probably has gassed people before, but that's irrelevant to whether or not we should have been dropping bombs before we are certain.
Okay, but I'm not asking you about dropping bombs. All I asked was...
But let me explain this real quick. You could say, oh, I'm not for that, but you can't just look at the situation of us being stationed in Syria in a vacuum, right? Mm-hmm. Again, think of this. We were told that what was the original reason we went into Syria? It was to combat ISIS, al-Nusra, Islamic extremism, correct?
Okay, it depends. Okay, what do you mean by go into Syria? It's just this is you're saying a lot of things. So when you say go into Syria, you mean Operation Hair Resolve? Is that what we're talking? Okay, yes, to combat ISIS, correct.
Right. That was the original excuse we had for actual sending U.S. military involvement, right? And at some point, that mission morphed into addition to fighting. Remember, for those listening, this is the situation. We went in there because allegedly we had to violate someone's sovereign nation to go into their country against their will.
Can I say, I don't care about sovereignty when it comes to human rights abuse. This is something
the
neocon. Listen.
Okay, Rumsfeld.
Wait. What do you think of the Holocaust, Rob? I
thought it was really bad.
Really bad. Okay, we agree on that. What about German sovereignty? Let's say Germany never declared war on the United States. Do you think the issue of German sovereignty should have been discussed when it came to stopping the Holocaust?
Sure. So now we'll do quid pro quo. Should we be invading China because of the internment of the Uyghur Muslims?
If we were able to actually stop the internment of the Uyghurs,
okay for it. You're okay with the Uyghurs.
No,
we don't invade China.
Whenever you're finished, I'll talk.
Go ahead.
If we were able to stop a human rights abuse around the world, anywhere, you can give me any litmus test, with the cost of it being relatively smaller than the benefit, then yes. When it comes to the issue of the Uyghur Muslims, any invasion to stop any human rights abuses in the Xinjiang region would cause nuclear war. Therefore, it's not practical. Whereas Adolf Hitler, you know, he didn't have nuclear weapons, and we were already combating the Japanese. Seemed like it would be something I'd be perfectly comfortable declaring war on Adolf Hitler to stop the Holocaust. I'd be perfectly comfortable saying that.
Let's use a better example then.
So, like,
were you against the Iraq War?
An appeal to sovereignty means nothing to me.
Were you against the Iraq War?
Yes, I was.
Why? You think Saddam was a good guy?
No, because the cost of the Iraq War was much more than the benefit of the Iraq War.
So we were okay with the human rights abuses that Saddam was doing because we thought
I never said it was okay.
I
never said it was okay. I said the cost is worse. For example, it'd be like, we're both against poverty, right? Should we give children Lambos who are poor? No, because the cost of building Lambos and giving them Lambos is ridiculous in comparison to the issue we're trying to fight here. We need to do it We need to do it in a more effective way. The cost there outweighs the benefit. So the cost of invading Iraq, the cost of invading China, it way outweighs the benefit. The civilian cost, the economic cost, the military cost, it way outweighs the benefit. Any humanitarian benefit they could try to pull out of it.
Again, sovereignty as a principle becomes total arbitrary.
Doesn't matter to me when it comes to human rights abuses.
For example, the Syria conflict has cost us billions of dollars. It's cost us billions.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
Yeah. So that cost was acceptable, but the Iraq War, you were okay.
Yes, because look at the death tolls. Compare the death tolls.
Okay, you would have looked at Iraqis and said, "Sorry, you're going through human rights abuses. We just don't think it'd be worth enough money. We think it would cost too many dollars.
It would cost too many civilian lives, death and destruction to do what we're doing, and the instability, considering there were already terrorists within Iraq before we invaded, that could have filled the vacuum, which they did, means it didn't make sense for an invasion. That's my opinion. And not to mention, the narrative that was built for the invasion of Iraq had nothing to do with humanitarian reasons. It had to do with the idea of weapons of mass destruction and collaboration with terrorists. The humanitarian stuff was just icing on the cake, whereas Operation Inherent Resolve had to do with combating ISIS, which was 100% effective in doing.
Okay, so but again, it's irrelevant because you protested me calling you a neocon, which I said was just my way of saying that you adapt these pro-interventionist policies. You've given the most pro-interventionist policy mindset that you could give, which is anytime that we think that it won't cost us that much and we see some sort of abuse in the country, we're obligated to send our military in.
When you say us, does that include civilians of the local country in question? I believe that you were saying that you think that the U.S. should get involved. Or we're just like painting my opinion in a certain way.
No. You tell me if I'm wrong about this. Your stance is this, that if there are human rights abuses occurring in a country and we do a cost-benefit analysis that says we could do this cheap, we don't care about sovereignty, we don't care about anytime we see any sort of human rights abuse, we should be able to send our military in if we think it'll be cost-effective.
Okay, so my analysis of cost benefit includes, of course, international repercussion and, of course, the civilian death toll, the effect on civilians in the native country. That's why I wouldn't have supported Iraq. I wouldn't have supported invasion of China, but let's say an intervention in Rwanda to stop the Rwanda genocide, intervention in Germany to stop the Holocaust, intervention in Yugoslavia. These are things that I think are completely morally permissible. And I'm not. By the way, I'm not saying that By the way, I'm a liberal internationalist. So the idea that I think America itself should gung ho do it, ridiculous. I do not support that at all. One of my biggest criticisms of Donald Trump was the fact that he was a kind of America first, not only domestically but internationally. When it came to the idea of how we deal with issues, we kind of go it alone. Whereas Joe Biden and the Democrats have taken a different stance on that. And particularly when we talk about Operation Inherent Resolve, it was not just the United States in northeastern Syria. It was also many of our allies in northeastern Syria. That's part of the reason why it was so effective in comparison to Operation Iraqi Freedom, which we saw like how the French reacted to it, etc.
It's irrelevant that there were a couple holdouts. We still had a bunch of allies that went with us in the international community in Iraq. The point is this. What happened there morphed into, and this is what happened every time, even if you think you're well-intended by having this pro-interventionist policy, we will see people that see that they can make a buck or obtain power by saying, well, once we're there, there's going to be mission creep and we're going to do a bunch of other stuff, just like happened in Syria. Like, the situation in Syria is so ridiculous that Joe Biden has bombed Syria twice since he's been in office, the few short moments. And here's the reason. Let's talk about the reason. He bombed the country of Syria, but he was actually bombing Iranians, who, by the way, were back at the table trying to lift a bunch of sanctions and give them a bunch of aid. So there are enemies so much that we have to bomb a separate country. We have to bomb Syria because Iran's so bad. But when it comes to Iran, we could actually give them benefit and give them aid and things like that. We could see the mission creep. It's always been about, as I forget the general, that I think it was Wesley Clark that admitted this, that it was always about wanting Assad to go, even as far back as the Iraq war, that there was an agenda, that there was an axis of evil, and part of it was going to be removing Assad. And all of this, but we're doing it for humanitarian reasons, is bullshit.
But
because
there's no way. There is no way that the FDF is going to remove Assad. Anybody who thinks that is insane. But if you want to talk about the FSA 2011, 2013, 2014 red line, then we can still have the discussion of what the Obama policy was when it comes to the removal of Assad. Their indecisiveness meant that it didn't really matter their position because their red line meant nothing. So it doesn't really matter when it comes to like what their position was because it fell through anyway. What Operation Inherent Resolve was a completely separate operation. Could those motives also been into play? Yes, but that is not going to remove Assad. Operation Inherent Resolve was never going to remove Assad. It was not going to remove Assad today. It's not going to remove Assad tomorrow. Assad is there to stay, whether we like it or not. The question now is about what is the future of northeastern Syria? Will it have some sort of regional governments? What is going to be the future of the SDF, the YPG, the YPJ? What is going to be the future of possible Kurdish, Yazidi, Arab sovereignty in northeastern Syria because of the long history of Assad like mowing down Kurdish protesters, denying them citizenship, etc. That is now the question of that. And of course, the stability that should be preserved, the future of the ISIS members that are still in prison, that have yet to be sent home, that are the most radicalized member. That is the future of the discussion about northeastern Syria. Nobody is under the delusion that the SDF has any ability to remove Assad at this point.
About, as you've admitted in past discussions, part of their mission there is to put pressure on Assad, even if they can't physically remove him. That is one of the reasons for the United States presence. It's also to put pressure on Russia because they view Assad as a pro-Russian sympathizer, right? And so and this isn't even secretive. Like, this has been NATO's mission. That's basically been the great, the worst kept secret, that there was a plan to encircle Russia and their allies and things like that. The same is true of like when we were arming the Mujahideen in Afghanistan in the 70s. This has all been about encircling Russia and making them and their allies kind of uncomfortable. So the idea, again, this is what blows my mind. The same people that you could admit have lied us into war after war and exploited, even if there's a good reason humanitarianly, we could say that. How many countries in the world would you say have humanitarian crises within their borders that would justify intervention if the cost-benefit analysis was good enough? 80%?
No, of course not. It's difficult because like the amount of countries where that's like an actual option to do is so. For example, Myanmar, terrible military junta has taken over. It's committed genocide, done terrible things. We could never invade Myanmar for a million different reasons. The first one, of course, being its proximity to the Chinese government and its relationship with the Chinese government, how China would definitely respond in a super aggressive way that would outweigh any benefit we could possibly be getting from that. Not to mention the fact that I'm pretty sure that the locals... What?
What if Russia responds to our interventionism in Syria? Then what? Was it worth it?
But they didn't, and they wouldn't. They don't have the leverage. Why? Because they're not going to attack American troops directly.
Well, it's weird then. Like, again, this seems in tension with
the first time that we actually saw American troops get attacked directly by a large power was during Trump's withdrawal, when there was multiple close calls with Turkish-backed militias and munitions. So actually, the closest call we had to that was that. Yes, you want to know? I agree with that. I think Turkey is an illiberal government that is working against the interests of NATO, whether it be in weapons programs with the Russian government or in what it's doing in Syria, what it's doing in the support of Azerbaijan and its invasion of Armenia, whether it has to do with, well, Libya, it's a little bit more complicated when it comes to the GNA and Khalifa Haftar, but still, I believe, or we could just talk about Cyprus for a little bit, or its violation of sovereignty when it comes to oil and gas drilling. There's a million things that it's doing, and Macron has like been hugely like active on this issue, like talking about like the importance of us challenging them in NATO and how they're working against NATO's interests. I agree with you on that. Okay.
What you say violations of sovereignty? You already admitted you don't give a shit about that.
Well, the thing is, I care about sovereignty when I don't care about sovereignty when it comes to the issue of human rights abuses. When it comes to the calculation of trying to stop those human rights abuses, there's the same reason I don't care about like violating German sovereignty during the Holocaust. There's certain instances where sovereignties matter and other issues where it doesn't matter. But because Well, yes,
The point is this, if I can,
because if we have
please,
international law, then we have to acknowledge that we're going to be violating sovereignty in some aspects if we have international law, right? Like, for example, if there's international law saying that it is illegal for one country to do a thing, then they do a thing and the entire world's like, hey, that's pretty bad. Maybe we should go in there and stop that. That is going to be some violation of sovereignty. To have a concept at all of international law is going to be something that could deal with people's sovereignty. That's why you have a lot of like far-right nut jobs in the United States that thinks the UN is going to come into America and set up like camps and the black helicopters and whatever. Like, so to some degree, I have to be like, when it comes to certain issues, like, yes, sovereignty is important in certain areas, but when it comes to human rights abuses, no.
Okay, so let me just say this. In a nutshell, here's what we have. Like, you could think, and this is what people that in like kind of, I hesitate to call you an authoritarian, but it is in that vein. People that want to have the power to say, I get to decide when it's okay to violate sovereignty, when it's okay to have interventionism and stuff like that. I would call that a form of authoritarianism or interventionism. And the problem is everyone that thinks, particularly on the left, that they're like, well, I'm okay with it, assume that people like themselves will be the ones making decisions. That's not the reality.
Just to be clear.
The people that I gave you a big chunk. I just want to get this out real
You've
quick.
talked like, I'm sure if I checked, you've talked like 70 to 80% of this time. Like
But I'm good. I should be talking now. Go ahead. I'll finish my point when you're done.
The thing is about this issue of, because I forget the points you make and then I never get to address them. So the issue of, well, this is authoritarian in nature. The thing is, what I'm doing in many of this is establishment of law. I believe in some form of law and order. I guess I'm the law and order person now, right? But there has to be laws of governance. And you can say that law in and of itself is authoritarian in nature. Sure, I mean, government taxation is theft. If we want to go like the ANCAP route, we can do that. But international law and having any sort of international law does like create a sort of like a government figure, which if you are against government in and of its whole, then yes, then I can understand that principle being held. But I'm in favor of law domestically and law internationally, meaning that there's certain areas where we say sovereignty is, of course, of extreme importance. For example, drilling rights, access to resources, territorial control, etc., right? But there's other instances, like during genocides, holocausts, mass slaughter, stuff like that, where the idea of, well, we can't go into the territory because that would be a violation of sovereignty. I think the price of the need to stop that human rights abuse outweighs any concern about sovereignty that we could possibly have.
Anyways, to finish my point, the problem is the people that are actually running the show are going to use this strategy that you're suggesting, the framework that you're suggesting, and they're going to use it to exploit. Every single time they invade, it's always, there's a human rights abuse going. This leader is really bad, and we need to go in, and it'll be quick, and we can get it done simply, and it won't cost a lot of dollars, and it won't cost a lot of U.S. lives, and we'll be able to do it without a lot of civilian casualties. And then almost every time we see that that's bullshit, and we end up staying there. Then we see that a bunch of people in the military-industrial complex end up getting incredibly wealthy off the exploitation of the people in that country. And I think that you're misjudging that. Like, one of the things that was said on the last panel I was on with you, and we brought up Syria, I brought up the point that sanctions were, according to human rights organizations, the sanctions that we're currently targeting in Syria have the net benefit of harming international aid to the poor people of Syria more than anything else. When I said that, you said, oh no, those sanctions are new. They're not new. We've had sanctions in Syria since 2013.
Now I can't remember like the discussion from like, I have no long, but what I was referring to, maybe this was a miscommunication, was the Caesar sanctions. These are new sanctions that have been placed on the government, and these are sanctions, by the way, this is because I have nuance, that I oppose. I oppose those sanctions. And so that shows, if anything, the nuance that I can have when it comes to these issues, that the reason why is I think they do more harm than good. And if my issue is stopping human rights abuses, and I think the Caesar sanctions are hurting more of the civilian population of Syria, particularly my area of interest, northeastern Syria. It's hurting them as well because there's not any areas in that in the sanction bill to actually, like, what's the word? Basically keep them out of the sanctions. This works against the idea that I have. So again, this is the nuance that I'm trying to have here. Okay. I feel like you're completely seeing past all nuance and you want to just paint me as like a caricature.
So here's what we have so far. You were against the bombing of Syria.
Yes.
You're against the sanctions of Syria.
Wait. When you say against the bombing of Syria, you mean Trump strike, not northeastern Syria anti-ISIS operations, right?
Sure. You're against the bombings that we had against pro-Assad forces.
Yes.
Okay. You're against that. You're against the sanctions.
Yes.
So the same groups that are doing that are the reason that those things will perpetually. Were you for Joe Biden strikes in Syria?
Just out of curiosity. For Joe Biden strikes in Syria? I was not for Joe Biden strikes in Syria.
Okay, so now we have four strikes.
But can I just clarify your characterization of his strikes? I don't understand it, because these strikes, the reason those strikes occurred was because there were certain groups within Iraq that did strikes against American forces, and they were in response to that, right?
Right.
So
but they weren't.
So I'm trying to understand, like,
were they Syrian forces?
They were not Syrian forces. But
okay,
those
so
wait, let me finish. Those forces, though, they work on the Syrian border, and they use the concept of sovereignty as a defense mechanism. As in, well, if they're fighting us in Iraq, we'll just move over to Syria and we're good. Don't worry about it. They do that all the time.
Okay, so that would be the equivalent if Mexico starts bombing Texas and says there were a bunch of people from the government of China that were in Texas that were doing things nefarious in our country of Mexico. Therefore, we violated your sovereignty by bombing your country, even though we're not even accusing you or anyone in your country of doing anything bad. There were just foreign nationals in your country, and that justified us bombing your country.
I already said I don't support it, but it wasn't we're attacking the Assad government because of what happened in Iraq. It was we were responding to what happened in Iraq by attacking the same group that attacked us within Iraq.
Okay, so nonetheless, the point I'm trying to make here is, so 4 instances of bombings you're against, the sanctions you're against, the reason that all this stuff can happen is because of the stance that you're having that we should be involved in Syria in the first place. And we will see more bombings that occur in Syria, and we will see more sanctions that occur in Syria, and we'll see more pressure being put against Assad in Syria. And all of this is because the pro-intervention policy that's allowed to occur, that's supported by people on the left like you. It's going to continue.
Okay, so let's bring it to the standard then. Do you think there should be taxes, Rob?
Do I? Yeah, sure.
But that stance you hold allows the government to tax us too much. That stance you hold allows the government to tax us for pointless wars. It allows us to tax us for wasting money all the time and does nothing but hurt the economy. And by you opening the door to taxes, it opens the door to government abuse of the tax system. And so it's a position that you hold that props up this government tyranny of American taxes. That is a lack of nuance that I am seeing applied to my position right now. I can be for a certain operation here and not for a certain operation over here. That's perfectly permissible. Just like it is possible for you to be for taxes in some situations to keep up, say, the police force or firefighters, but not for it to, I don't know, do whatever, like government tyranny, Clinton statues or whatever you're against.
The example doesn't make sense because the idea of taxation is something that we all understand is something that's inherently in the contract that we have with the government. A more apropos comparison would be this. Let's say that you live in the DC region, I think. So let's say that we said that the police in DC are allowed to enter people's homes without warrants and do whatever they want. And we think that that's a good idea because they're cracking down on gangsters that are selling drugs to do that. But also those same police that are breaking in are doing a bunch of heinous shit to innocent people. That policy that you're endorsing of allowing them to kind of do something that was unethical in the first place or was extremely likely to lead to unethical things is predictably leading to unethical things. Same thing here. We violate the sovereignty of Syria by putting troops on the ground. It's led by people that we've seen over and over recommend putting troops on the ground to do nefarious shit. And then predictably they do nefarious shit.
But I don't believe that the Operation Inherent Resolve was an immoral action. What about Operation Inherent Resolve was immoral? You're going to bring up the issue of sovereignty, which I've already said, like when it comes to human rights abuses, I don't quite frankly care. So the question would be, what about Operation Inherent Resolve, which we then abandoned, was immoral? What about that operation was immoral? Do you have a problem with the number of drone strikes, casualties? Like, what part about it was immoral?
The immorality of it was that it was simultaneously directed against Assad. If we would have went in and said, as Trump suggested in his second debate with Hillary Clinton, if we would have contacted Assad and said, look, we don't really like you, but we feel that we need to come into your country because of the people you're fighting, al-Nusra, ISIS, etc. Can we help you by giving you assets and helping with assets to wipe these people out? I would have been fine with that. Instead, under the auspices of wiping out al-Qaeda, al-Nusra, ISIS, and all these other groups, we ended up backing a bunch of people that just so happened to also be fighting Assad. That's the immorality.
Wait. The SDF also fought the FSA. The SDF also fought al-Nusra. The SDF did engage with Assad, but then of course also, want to know one of the biggest criticisms that a lot of Syrians, I get in trouble with some Syrians, not because I oppose Assad, but because I support the SDF, and they see the SDF as Assad collaborators, because the SDF has made multiple agreements with the Assad government. The SDF does not want an independence movement to start a completely separate country. The SDF is a country that has made agreements with the Assad government. I mean, not a country, is a region, is a military force that has made agreements with the Assad government. So you can say that the American military operation, that certain people were motivated by different factors to get involved, but we also would need to make that framing under the understanding that the SDF has, quote unquote, collaborated with the government of Bashar al-Assad as well. By the way, we have to wrap it up. It's 8
to end it. You said it 9.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll just say real quick. Certainly, many of the groups that we backed militaristically and gave weapons to were groups that were oppositional to Assad. That's the problem. If we wanted to wipe out ISIS, that would have been the sole singular focus. We wouldn't have tiptoed around, and we're also supporting groups that are anti-Assad, and we're going to bomb Assad. So we're going to have sanctions against Assad and things like that.
And I can oppose certain actions and support other actions. For example, if I support the war on poverty, and let's say some people are doing it to actually combat poverty, and some people are involved because they just want to get votes, right? I can be like, I think you giving Lambos to those kids, which might get you votes from those kids, was not really a smart thing, but I still want to support the give the sandwich to the orphan program. I can still support the orphan program and be against the Lambo program. I can support Operation Inherent Resolve and be against possibly like Timber Sycamore or some strike that Trump did.
You could support having the cops go into the homes to get drug dealers, but be against when they predictably go after people that aren't drug dealers.
By the way,
that's what's happening. It's not just that you could pick and choose. Sure, you could pick and choose. The problem is the entire reason for being there in the first place was a bad idea.
I would support drug raids, but I don't believe drugs are a problem. Okay, anyway, we have to wrap it up.
Okay, we can talk some other day. I do appreciate you having me on. Even if you are a neocon, we'll put the glasses on. Let's bomb. Let's do it, man. Let's invade all those countries. Let's do it.
Look,
progressives, we'll do it, man.
Look, I mean, you're my favorite Neville Chamberlain.
Well, thank you so much, young Cheney. I look forward to talking to you in the future, and I won't go duck hunting with you. I will say that. So
wonderful.
Yeah, have a good one, man.
Have a good one.
Take it easy.
That was certainly a conversation. I don't know what I expected, but I don't think he was able to prove that I was a neoconservative. But that, I guess, the premise changed to if I was a war hawk because I supported one conflict. I think for me to be a war hawk, you need to find like a consistent pattern of me supporting wars like Iraq or stuff like that.
A curd is a curd.
Anyway, I'll post that in the future. And by the way, my problem with the Biden strikes are completely based on the AUMF authorization. I believe the AUMF needs, if you're going to do stuff like that, the AUMF is, I find it very hard to believe that 2001, 2003, any AUMF that we have used, being used as a justification for the strikes we did against the Iranian-backed militias in Iraq that the strikes against us is ridiculous. So it isn't as much as like a tit-for-tat type thing that you need in international relations if you're going to be engaging in such conflicts. It is more that we are using a completely inaccurate authorization to do those operations. Rob just argues to argue, I think. A little bit. I think he does. I think he does to a degree. I mean, it's so weird to, like, in one room hear just like I'm a war hawk because I supported one military operation once, and then in the next room be told like I'm a fascist because I didn't support the invasion of Iraq or a fascist collaborator. I feel like, I don't know, like nuance is like a thing we should all have, you know? The AUMF needed to be repealed years and years ago, and conservatives have been calling for this for years. Dude, I don't know what fucking... I mean... it was the Democrats that fought against the... Oh, whatever. I'm not gonna get into it. Look, all I know is there's a lot more Democrats that oppose the AUMF than there are Republicans. 100%.